We are live.
All right, great. Thanks, Kim. If you could please share the slide deck. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our June meeting. We do have a fairly packed meeting today with lots of things we're going to try to accomplish. We only have June and July left, and so there's a lot of work still for us to do to get our portion of the draft model ready to go so that it can be presented to PEPSC. If you can go to the next slide, please. So today, you received the agenda in the email from Kim. She sent out the pre-meeting email along with several other materials that are there for your reference. And so today, our primary goals are going to be to review and start working on some possible solutions and answers to the feedback that we've received from several different teachers in the field, including the feedback that Julie Pittman has received through the DPI teacher feedback sessions, and also the letter that we received from NCACTE. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those concerns and keeping those concerns at the forefront as we continue our work. And I would also really like our subcommittee to look at some of the specific things in those recommendation letters and from the feedback that we've received that relates directly to the Advancement and Development Subcommittee. What we're going to look at today is a fraction of the feedback, recommendations, and concerns that you will see in the full scope of the picture, because I've pulled out what was related to our subcommittee. But we did receive the entire slide deck from Julie's presentation from the feedback she's received. You can also access that presentation from the co-chairs meeting on the YouTube channel. We'll get that link to you as well so that you can watch the entire feedback and understand what the feedback is for each one of the 4 subcommittees. And the NCACTE letter was attached to your email that you received prior to the meeting, so you can read the entire NCACTE letter. And I would encourage you to do that if you have not already had a chance to do that. We will then go into a breakout session and try to answer some of those questions and think through some of those answers. I'm going to leave the documents that we'll be working on in the breakout session open for a few days before I start pulling the data and the information that you've included off those, just to give everyone some time that if you don't have time to fully answer those questions, or if you think of something after our meeting finishes, that you'd be able to go back in and make some changes or add any additional thoughts that you had to the answers for your group's pages. One thing I do ask that you do, though, is don't change anyone else's comments. So if you're like adding to or modifying a comment that you made in the breakout session, please feel free to do that, but please do not modify anyone else's comments that they made during the breakout sessions. And then we are going to do a second breakout session where we're going to start looking at the specific competencies and support that's part of our charge and our roles and responsibilities as the Advancement and Development Subcommittee. So we're going to really try to finish that work today. I will be sending a poll out via email on Monday that will be suspense to return back on the 6th of June. And we'll review that again one more time at the end of the meeting. So that will give everyone who's here today some chance to think through some of the different things we're going to talk about, those competencies and support, continue adding to those and thinking about them as we go through the weekend. And then also for anyone else who was unable to attend our meeting today, that will give them plenty of time to have an opportunity to review the video recording of today's session, and then also have an opportunity to look at the document so that they are able to also vote on the competencies and support for each one of the licensure levels. So if I could please get someone to make a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Don Phipps. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Don. And if I can get a second?
Seconded. This is Dyson.
Thank you. Are there any, for all the yays? Are there any opposed? Okay, the motion carries and the agenda has been approved. You also received a copy of the minutes from our May 9th meeting in the pre-meeting email. So if you haven't already taken a look at those, if you could quickly look over them, and if I could get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the May 9, 2022 Advancement and Development meeting.
This is Patricia Bricker, so moved.
Second.
This is Jeff McDarris. I second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion carries and the meeting minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so just a quick reminder of what our advancement and development priorities and responsibilities are. We are charged with determining the specific policy level competencies for the licensure level. And we share that responsibility with licensure and also with prep and entry. We are also to determine the support by principals, mentors, and teacher leaders, and we share that responsibility with licensure. We are also to determine the configuration of measures that are needed at each level. We are to develop the verification process for how teachers work and they acquire those competencies. And we are to determine the rules of the professional advancement accounts, and we share that responsibility with budget and compensation. Next slide, please. So just a quick reminder of the estimated timeline. We do have 2 meetings remaining as a subcommittee. The draft will be presented to PEPSC in August. It will be approved for first read. It'll be approved by PEPSC in September, then go to the state board in October for presentation. And then the state board would have an opportunity to either approve or disapprove the draft model at the November or December meeting. Next slide, please. So I do want to do a quick overview of the summary that Julie received the summary of the teacher feedback that Julie received. And she is on the call. So if there's anyone who has any specific questions that I'm unable to answer, Julie is here so that she can provide some additional background and information on the feedback sessions. But this just kind of shows you an overview from the pre-session survey of where teachers were kind of feeling going into this. So most teachers did agree that the licensure process and compensation schedule needs reform. These two questions, or these two areas were married together though, and we recognize that budget and pay and compensation and licensure are two distinct parts, and they're separate from each other. And this question did not break those two concepts apart. And so in future feedback sessions, the plan is to more specifically ask licensure in one question and then compensation in a second question, to ensure we're getting some accurate feedback on where teachers think things need to change. Most teachers are pretty 50-50 on whether or not they have a good understanding of the proposed model. There are many teachers who had concerns about the components of the licensure plan. Most teachers did agree that we should be basing the compensation on something other than just experience. And most teachers, also about a little over 50%, agreed that we should be using various performance indicators to help compensate teachers in the roles that they fill in our classrooms. There were 3 really big questions that came out of the feedback sessions from our teachers. The first is, why is this reform necessary, and why do we include budget and or licensure and compensation in the same model? Like, why are those being tied together when those are 2 separate entities? Why is this the time to do the work during one of the most difficult times in the lives of teachers and schools because of the COVID pandemic? And how will this improve the education system? So the questions that specifically came out that were directed toward advancement and development that we're really going to work on today and really try to answer some of these questions and think through some solutions in our part of the draft model so that we're able to address these concerns and questions from teachers is, how would teachers actually move from one license level to the other? So what's going to be the system that teachers would be able to move from a level license 3 teacher to a license 4 teacher, or from a license 1 teacher to a license 2 teacher, or a license 1 teacher to a license 3 teacher? We need to start thinking about that. How is that going to look? How do we design a system that is easy to navigate? So right now the system looks like it could be very cumbersome and burdensome and could be kind of confusing in order to move through the different levels of licensure. So how do we develop a system that works well for teachers and is easy to navigate? Who is going to measure the competencies for advancement, and who will determine if the PD selected meets the criteria to maintain a license? So when teachers have the opportunities to select their own PD, how are we going to ensure that that PD actually is informing their teaching practice and helping them to become better teachers? How do we build, train, and support a culture of collaboration? So one of the main comments that we received throughout the feedback sessions was that there are teachers that are very concerned that this model model is going to make things competitive and not collaborative. So we, as the Advancement and Development Committee, really need to think through some of the different ways that we can build into the model to ensure that this is collaboration where teachers are being supported in their teaching practice and have the people that they can reach out to that can come in and assist them and help them when they need some support and help them be reflective and find places in their teaching practice where they have opportunities to improve so they can better serve the students in their class. And we do not want this to be something where teachers are competing with each other and therefore not willing to share or not willing to help each other and not willing to collaborate. We want to ensure that we're building out a model that is rooted in collaboration so that the teachers that need assistance in their teaching practice have the supports in place in order to improve their teaching practice. Will teachers of special populations have the same growth opportunities as other teachers? And an example here would be the EC teachers, because they have a smaller number of EC teachers than we have of the core content or other types of teachers. There was a concern from the EC teachers that they would not have the same growth opportunities that other teachers may have. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about that as we're developing our portion of the model. And what is the role of micro-credentials and how will they be validated? Next slide, please. So we also had a call to action that was specifically sent to our subcommittee, and that is to identify the core competencies bridging the licensure levels and account for the advanced roles as separate positions requiring a license for, not as the next steps in licensure. And so if you recall from our meeting in May, we actually looked at a potential new infographic to replace the green stair-step infographic. You're going to have that on your document that you'll be working with in Breakout 1 today. You'll see the current infographic, that's the green one that looks like the tiered steps going up from apprentice all the way through the adult leadership teacher. And then you're going to see a second model that shows the apprentice through license 4 as that stair step, but then pulls out the classroom excellence and the adult leadership teacher as level 4 teachers that have advanced credentialed opportunities. And so we'd like your feedback on which of those two models you think, or which of those infographics best depicts the draft model. Next slide, please. There was also calls to communication for all the subcommittees, and these are really around kind of some of the language we're using and ensuring that we're being clear and precise in the way that we're describing things coming out of our subcommittees, to ensure that when we're talking about something on the Advancement and Development Subcommittee, the phrases and the terminology and the terms that we are using align with the other subcommittees so that teachers who are listening to these subcommittee meetings hear consistent language throughout each of those meetings. They also want to know, what is the data that supports this model? So what is happened in other states? Have we seen things in other districts? Is there research that verifies and backs up that this would be a good way to help support our teachers and to compensate teachers? How does this address system concerns and recommendations? So where does Leandro fall into this? What about Hunt-Lee, the West Ed report, accountability? How are stakeholder concerns being addressed? Clarify effectiveness measures. So would teachers, like if let's say on year 1, I picked that I was going to use the QGR, would I be required to use the QGR for my other 3 years of demonstrating effectiveness in my 5-year period? Or would I have the option to use the QGR in year 1 and then use student surveys and principal evaluations and peer evaluations in year 2 and then use EVA scores in year 3? So we definitely need to clarify that to help teachers understand how this may work. And then finally, consider the advanced roles as advanced parental positions instead of the next steps for licensure. So we look at the current infographic, it appears that after you become a level 4 teacher, that your next progressive step in licensure would be to become a level 4 plus classroom excellence teacher and then become a level 4 plus adult leadership teacher. And the reality is that level 4 teacher is the professional classroom teacher. So that should be our top level, and then pull the other 2, classroom excellence and adult leadership, out to show that those are advanced credential positions that you would be able to apply for and to work in once you reach the level 4 license. Next slide, please. We also really want to make sure that we are really considering and honing in on this concern that teachers have about collaboration versus competition. And I've already discussed that a little bit, but that's very important that we are ensuring that we're developing a collaborative model, not a competition model. We also want to address the evaluation instrument to ensure that the evaluation instrument would be multiple observers, not one observer who's watching a teacher, and that whatever tool is developed does have inter-rater reliability, so that as multiple raters or evaluators are evaluating and observing a teacher, that the scores that they're getting on that evaluation is consistent. We also need to make sure that we're using common, precise language across all 4 subcommittees, reports, and communication. So that will be something that Dr. Mahar and I will definitely be working with the other subcommittee chairs to ensure that we are using the same types of language that they are when we're discussing common ideas and themes, to make sure that we are not causing any confusion for teachers in the field. All right, so going into breakout session 1, what we would really like for you to do in that breakout session is to work through, there's a list of questions that you're going to see that came from the NCACTI recommendations, and also a list of questions that came from the feedback sessions from Julie. And then there's a couple other questions that you'll see on there that have come specifically for some different teachers, but we've seen those same questions asked over and over again. So that's going to be the first part you're going to work on. And then the second thing that we would like you to do in that breakout session is to consider whether or not we should change from the current green infographic. And again, you'll have that infographic once you open your document in your breakout room, whether we should shift from that green infographic to the infographic where it shows a stair step up to level 4, and then the CE and AL pulled out as advanced credentialed positions. So you'll be in that breakout session for 30 minutes. Then we'll come back out after the breakout session and have about 10 minutes of whole group to share, and then do a quick vote to see whether or not people are in favor of adopting a slightly modified infographic from what we currently have. So Kim, if you could go ahead and put us into the breakout rooms, that would be great.
I just wanted to ask everyone if they had access to the Google folder, because I can put that back in the notes. I mean, in the chat, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can
put that link in the chat.
Did you drop it in the chat already? I don't have the chat open.
No, I didn't. I can stop sharing and go ahead and do that.
Yeah, no, I can drop it in real. Okay, you already got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh yes, and Melissa, I'm sorry. The QGR is the qualitative growth review. So that would be the evaluation tool where teachers would use different metrics other than EVOS to demonstrate their effectiveness.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find this.
Here, I think I can pull it up real quick. You guys would think after like 15 months of doing this, I would have the link ready to go, right?
Did you get it, Maureen? I think I have it.
I did not get it yet. I was still opening
Okay.
Chrome. So if you got it, that's great.
Yeah, I just...
Sorry for the delay, guys.
Okay, if anyone has any trouble, just let me know. And I will start the breakout sessions.
weeks maybe. It's hard to say.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So they're working on it hard as they can. But see, we couldn't order them until we got these down so we could measure them properly. That was the problem.
Now, once you get them, it doesn't take that long.
One day to put them up.
Okay.
Trent's working on muting. I was just talking to Kim about it. Hopefully we can mute this.
That's right, you're doing the dump truck.
These are standard, these are metric. I don't know if the blue is standard or the blue is metric, I don't know. It doesn't, there's no markings on here. That's metric. Because when you open it up, it shows you inside what it is.
This is the metric.
That's the metric, this is the.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, I got you. I ain't seen one like this in a while.
One of the tools, dude.
There you go.
Just step out of the way, you can shit.
That's
You
right.
don't have to stand on
I
your
don't have a ladder.
tiptoes. You gotta have a tongue out.
You get it. That's right.
You gotta stand on your tiptoes and do this, that's wrong.
And I'm lucky that most of the time, long arms. All right.
No, just screwdriver. Phillips head, take that one out.
Yeah.
Because usually if you lift up the bottom, then it'll pop out, so you have to get a screwdriver flat. Phillips head. Weird.
It is a little weird.
There you go. I know, watch that fire sprinkler head. You're gonna pop that thing, we'll all get wet.
Until 3 o'clock. There's no way.
right. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are going to do a quick round robin, just a few minutes per group to just give us an overview of what you talked about in your group, any emerging themes that you had come up, and any maybe highlight thoughts that you had as you move through your group. So we can go ahead and start with group one.
I guess that would be me. This is Patricia Bricker. Oh gosh, Maureen, help me out because I'm out of everything we talked about.
Would you want to bring up that last point that we talked about at the very end?
Sure. We were talking about the suggestion for the new model that puts the advanced credential opportunities in a different view on the model. And we were sharing that we're supportive of that. And another idea that I have thought about and wanted to share is that I think in the effort of trying to make this doable and simplified, I would suggest that we consider the possibility of combining license 1 and 2 into one level. So there'd be an apprentice, then there would be kind of an early licensure level that would be a combination of what's in 1 and 2 right now, and then a license 3 that is kind of what's in the model being proposed right now. So I want to throw that out there.
All right. Thanks so much, Patricia. Group 2, do you want to have your recorder unmute and just give us a quick overview, please?
I assume that is me. And anyone else in my group, feel free to chime in. We talked about several things that seem to still be very unclear around this, and that we aren't sure that we can even answer. But one of the things that we did raise, and I've highlighted in our document, is, how would this model work with the current licensure models that have been passed to sort of Band-Aid the fact that we just don't have enough supply. For example, the permit to teach, the limited licenses, the emergency permits, where does all that fit? We are currently seeing a lot of districts that are already telling us that next year they're going to just use the permit to teach for all their new hires. They're not going to do a residency because they don't, the folks don't want to have to go take courses, or they don't want to have to do modules, or they don't want to have to do NTPA, or they don't want to have to do testing. So just take all that stuff away and they put them on a permit to teach. How does that fit with this work? We don't know. So we just want to be sure that all of these pieces are not reducing quality, that we are, increasing and maintaining quality, which doesn't feel like we're moving in that direction with some of the, not necessarily this model, but with the current, policies seem to be moving more toward just putting bodies in classrooms versus quality.
Okay, thanks so much for sharing that, Laura. We appreciate it. If we could get group 3 to share out, please.
Sure. I think that's me, unless Dason, you wanted to chime in. So we kind of just made our way through some of these questions that we thought were things that we could address right away, perhaps. But we had a conversation really around kind of this transition and thinking about so who is the responsible party, so to speak, from moving from license 1 to 2 to 3. And if folks are inside of an EPP, they have a provider, then it's really the provider making the recommendation in the same way that we do that now, right? So you've got an approved program, folks move from one to the next. And so to get to that license 3, you've got a provider who's making that recommendation. The level 4 is really about the LEA or the PSU making the recommendation. And the other piece that we kind of talked about here was once you moved from the 4 and then with the 2 additional categories, we thought that was a great opportunity to connect EPPs to this work. So if earning the credential doesn't necessarily earn you a position to be an advanced teacher, but one of the ways you could credential is through an EPP program. Outside of an EPP, we would need a DPI to create a model where we, vetted these credentials as well. And then we also agreed that, with this idea of micro-credentials or some other something like that, micro-credentials in particular, one of the recommendations that there should be some group inside of DPI perhaps that's funded to vet any of these micro-credentials that folks are using. And then lastly, with regard to any of these evaluations that are being used for the expert teacher, we really need a process where we essentially validate evaluators, because I think, one of the big challenges we have with NESAs is we do a training, but we don't really do a validation of the evaluator. So there's no inter-rater reliability. We don't know, how valid and reliable those data really are. And I think that's part of our problem is we can't discern difference between people inside of the NESAs because we haven't done any of that background work. So I think we're strongly advocating for some kind of a validation process for any of these things.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Mike. Appreciate it. And then group 4.
Hi. So we spent a lot of time on the first 4 questions. I think one of the things we started talking about was this, in question 4, we started to get kind of in the weeds a bit because it starts to intersect with implementation, I think, in trying to answer some of these questions about how teachers move from one licensure level to another. And we, talked about, for example, if some of your demonstration of competency is based on EVAS, for example, like the timing of when you actually get those results will determine, when you would even be able to move from one license level to another, and sort of thinking about some of those things as we develop the policy around it will be important, kind of like thinking a little bit ahead to implementation. Clearly there has to be a thought. One of the specific questions there was around how these roles, the teacher leadership roles of classroom excellence and adult leadership would be different from roles that currently exist in districts already. And the sort of initial reaction was that it makes sense that if you're currently in a teacher leader type role, that you would likely transition into one of those roles. But also, there may need to be some shift in specific responsibilities, because part of this is my opinion, but like part of what I think really is important in this current licensure system is that there is interaction and synergy between different licensure levels. And I think probably most districts already have that happening, that, a more advanced expert teacher leader type role is working with more novice teachers, for example. But like with the creation of the apprentice teacher role, for example, there needs to be some more formality in terms of that alignment between different roles and their responsibilities. And so there probably does need to be, again, in this sort of more implementation, but also related to how the policy itself is developed, some thought put into some of those pieces. And anybody else jump in if there's things you think we should share.
Hey, thanks so much for that overview, Melissa. Appreciate it. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to leave those documents open. I'm not going to pull your answers off until next Friday, June the 10th. So if you think of something else or you didn't have a chance to make it to some of the questions you wanted to add some thoughts on, you can continue adding to your document. Just please do not change anyone else's inputs that they put on there, so we can make sure we're getting an authentic reflection of what people think for the answers to those questions. And then if there's something else that you want to add, please just add it on to the bottom of that section if there's additional information that you wanted to include. So Kim, if you go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, go back one. I thought I put the poll question in there, but so what I would like to do is we also asked everyone to discuss that the change in the infographic. So we currently have the green infographic, which is the one that's been included in the information that came from Tom, the information that you've seen like in all the articles, that kind of thing. That green one where it looks like a stair step going from apprentice all the way through adult leadership. We have a second possible infographic that depicts the model as moving from apprentice through the license 4, and then having the adult leadership and the classroom excellence teachers pulled out as advanced credentialed opportunities, which demonstrates that those are not, like, we're not expecting every single teacher to be a successful teacher to move from a license 4 to CE and then to AL. The expectation is that teachers would be a license 4 teacher, and then if they wanted to take on these additional leadership roles and opportunities, those would be available for them, and we built into the licensure structure. So I just wanted to get if anybody, does anybody have any comments on the change in the a potential change in that infographic?
Maureen, this is Julie.
Yep, go ahead, Julie.
We talked about in our breakout session about taking off the bottom 2 boxes on that far right column, since those are not part of what this particular group and PEPSC as a whole has been charged to do. We had used those bottom 2 boxes as reference points when talking with teachers. And so I would propose that those 2 boxes be eliminated and just the classroom excellence and adult leadership boxes be in the space beyond the license 4.
Awesome. Thank you for that recommendation, Julie. I appreciate it. Did anybody else have any comments on the potential draft change model?
This is Patricia, and I appreciate what Julie just said. And I wanted to add that I think it's actually helpful to have them on there. And so maybe a different format might make sense, because I understand that they're not advanced teaching roles, but the idea that in this work you can progress in different kinds of ways, and the classroom leader and the adult leader are options, but so are becoming an administrator or a district office person. And I think there's great potential to think about those advanced teaching roles in some ways as parallel different choices that someone can make to advance their careers. So I guess I'm saying we might want to think about value of somehow incorporating that. If those boxes are gone, maybe there's a note that goes with it or something like that. In my mind, it also really connects to the idea that you can go through a preparation program to become a principal or a superintendent, and that's what leads you to your credential. And I think that could very likely be a model and parallel for how you become a classroom leader or an adult leader.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective, Patricia. Go ahead.
This is Jeff. I'll second what Patricia said. I like what you're thinking. And maybe it's something as simple as, current opportunities or current advancement areas and proposed advancement areas or something, so that you're showing that that these are still options, but not something that this group is proposing changing, or, something like that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Jeff. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I think separating the advanced roles part from the licensure, I think makes perfect sense, because I think the current infographic, I think, leads people to believe that those are the next steps. And while they may be for some teachers, it's not, it is a different opportunity versus sort of getting to license 4. So I think the new framing of that in the infographic really helps to differentiate that.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. Anybody else have any comments they wanted to make?
Maureen, I'm happy to work with some of the communications folks on trying to draft out some of the comments that have been made and bring it back for a final vote in July, if that's where the group would like to go, so that they have a couple of things to consider.
Yeah, I like that idea, Julie. I think that's a great idea. So let's do that. So take the model that we currently, like the blue one, the blue infographic, and take it back to the communications team to see if we can maybe have like a couple of different versions and see what people like the best or something, or build it out based on the comments. I really like that idea. So let's Kim, do we need to do a vote to do that, or do we
just say that the next step would be to go to the communications team. I think if you're making a decision, you don't have to, that's not the final decision. I don't think you necessarily need to have a vote for that.
Okay.
I think when it's brought back, people could possibly give reasons right now why they object to that, but I don't think you need a vote for that.
Okay, great. So is there anyone that objects to us taking the blue infographic, the new one, and taking that to the communications team to get it built out a little bit more so that we could look at that as a final vote at our July meeting?
There's also a note in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point, Patricia. Yeah, Patricia had brought up when she did the license or the group 1 share out, that the potential of combining license 1 and license 2 to make the model a little bit easier to navigate and less confusing. And so that's definitely something that maybe, Julie, maybe we could do like one, but I think we'd have to take that to licensure too, though. But because Kim, that's not something that advancement and development could do, but we could send that as feedback to the licensure. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe it goes into licensure. I believe that's right.
Okay, so Patricia, what I'm going to do is I will send that as feedback to Dr. Bullock to let her know that that was something that we discussed in our meeting, and to get to have them bring that up at their meeting. But we can also, and I can get with you to make sure that, like, before I send it to her, that I capture the ideas correctly, or maybe you and I could like jump onto do something like to make sure I have everything drafted properly to convey your ideas. Does that sound good?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, well, if we didn't have any objections, then let's go ahead and plan to have Julie take that to the communications team to get that built out a little bit further. And thank you all so much for your comments around that. That's very helpful in helping us kind of move forward in the work. So we are going to go into a second breakout session. In this session, you're going to continue using that same document that you were using in breakout 1. And now we're going to be looking at the specific policy-based competencies for each licensure level, along with the support. So you're going to see the slide from the draft model that breaks out the competencies and the supports. Those were built around the conversations that we had last fall and going into the winter, so that we have the opportunity to make suggestions, changes, or recommendations to those. So in the space below each one of those slides, if you can just capture anything that your group comes up with, ideas that you have, things you think work well, things you think should be changed, then I will have an opportunity to compile all of that information along with Dr. Mahar, and we will send that out once we kind of categorize everybody's thoughts and ideas and recommendations. You'll see that come out as a email poll outside of our meeting to approve or disapprove the recommendations. I'll send that poll out on the 6th of June, which is Monday, and then we would ask for you to return it by the 10th of June, which gives everyone who was not available to be in our meeting today an opportunity to listen through today's presentation and have a chance to look at the recommendations and supports. So Kim, if you can go in and put us into the breakout rooms, please. We'll be in this breakout room for 40 minutes and then come back for a 20-minute, not quite 20-minute, but we'll come back for the rest of the time. We'll do an whole group.
Hey, Kim, this is Jeff. I had to log off and get back on my phone. Is there any way you can
Sure.
put me in breakout 4?
Sure.
components.
Sorry, you got cut off mid-sentence, Patricia. Great thought, though. All right. Well,
we were talking.
Yeah, I know there's never enough time. I'm sorry. It's always like everybody's mid-sentence. I know. And I wish we could have more time because it's great conversation. So what I would love to do real quick is if we could just do a quick share out. Just kind of what you guys talked about. I know we didn't make it very far. We made it. We were kind of talking about the apprenticeship through 3 is where we really made it. Again, I'm going to leave these open throughout the rest of today and over the weekend before I really start looking at building out the poll questions to kind of see where people are on what they believe that the recommendations and support should be, or the requirements and supports for each one of those licensure levels. So feel free to continue adding thoughts and ideas to these documents over the next couple of days. As you think of things, or if you are in conversations with colleagues and you have ideas, please feel free to add those down. Just one thing I do ask is that you don't change anybody else's thoughts. So modify anything that you put down or add anything that you would like to, but please do not change anything that someone else has already put. So Patricia, do you want to do like a quick overview of what we talked about in group 1?
Sure. I think one of the big ideas that we talked about across levels is the idea that we have some good structures in place that we want to build on, not get rid of, and then add additional ones that would help the system as a whole. And so in that light, we're thinking that in some of the levels, like level 1 and level 2, it makes sense under the requirements that one of the options is that you could affiliate with an EPP and participate in a residency license program, and to really explicitly state that on there as a pathway. And in a similar light, on level 3, we need to very explicitly say that one of the requirements could be is that you have completed an EPP to be at level 3. And then also wanted to consider the possibility that with the EPP completion, we need alternatives just like there are for other pathways, so that Pearson and Praxis licensure exams are an option but not a requirement.
Great. Thank you so much, Patricia. I appreciate that. Group 2, would you like to kind of give us a share out of what you discussed in your group?
Sure. And my group, feel free to chime in. We had quite a bit of conversation. We were sort of all over the place a little bit. But looking at license 3, one thing that does seem to be missing there is EPP completion. That was not on it was on the original graphic. So that's something that's a little concerning, specifically related to EPPs. We also talked a little bit about thinking about this word competencies versus what seems to be on there are requirements. And so looking at, I think we focused more on requirements and looking and evaluating what was on the slide that we presented with versus coming up with specific competencies. But we did raise some questions around peer observations, and we were having a really good conversation around NESIS and principal evals and whatnot too. I think that we were looking at. I'll stop there.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Laura. I appreciate those comments. Group 3, did you have anything that you wanted to share out?
Sure. So for the apprenticeship, we did think that it would be, it should be a registered apprenticeship for those who are eligible, and then the license and I guess this speaks more to the structure of the license than competencies or support, but recommend extending the license term to 5 years instead of 3. And then if a teacher shows effectiveness for 3 years before the license expires, then that teacher should be able to move to license 4. And wanting to extend it to 5 years so that they have an opportunity to show effectiveness 3 out of 5 years to move into license 4. For license 4, recommend that effectiveness when looking at EVAS growth measures should be measured at 0 or greater. And then also had a question around the one of the other considerations about the service obligation as part of renewal requirements, whether that may not be or having some language or exception for folks who are wanting to maintain their license, but for some reason are not in the classroom. And I think for the last thing for the adult leadership, we had a discussion about one of the ways to measure effectiveness for renewal, since they would not be in the classroom, would be to somehow to measure the professional growth of the teachers that that adult leader would be working with for their licensure renewal. I think that's all. Just a quick rundown of what we talked about.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And as you were talking, I thought about one thing too, just to kind of throw it out there in the universe. Right now, to meet growth, you have to be between -2 and 2, right? And to exceed, you're over 2. So I wonder if on the meeting growth metric, should we have it EVA score of 0 or higher, or should we have it EVA score of -2 or higher? Since that's the current way that we measure growth.
Yeah, that's how it should read then, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. As he was talking through the group threes, I was thinking about that. So I think that's important. So thank you you guys for highlighting those. Appreciate it.
We thought it was important too, Maureen, just to note that, right, the expectation is to meet growth, right? To be an effective teacher, I meet growth. I don't have to exceed growth.
Right. Right. Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. All right. And group 4.
I'm so sorry. I actually have to hop off in just 1 second to join another meeting. But we talked a lot about the adult leader role, and specifically the idea that how is it different from the expert teacher role, or whatever we're calling that now, classroom excellence role, and we talked about the need for that role to really be potentially having some competency in it that is about actual demonstrated growth and performance of the other adults that individual is mentoring and providing support to. Clearly, for a somebody first time in that role, they wouldn't be able to demonstrate that if they hadn't done that before. But for perhaps current individuals currently in that role, or for perhaps renewal of that role in the future of that certification area, that we would have some sort of measure of the performance or growth of teachers under their purview. We also talked about just ensuring that student teachers are clarified as being part of the apprenticeship license level, and to and to just make sure that there's really clear what the differences between that classroom leader and adult leader are when it comes to competencies, even though basically that one is about remaining in the classroom and sharing expertise with colleagues, whereas the other is outside of the classroom, leading teachers in their professional development. And so we haven't quite captured what the competency is, but just making sure that that is clearly outlined both as an expectation and also figuring out a way to capture that competency.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so we are a few minutes over, so we're going to kind of speed through these last couple of slides here. Again, if you think of other things, please be sure to add those. We look for the poll that I'll be sending out here on Monday. And if you need to go back and review the video or anything like that, it will be available. If you have any questions, please feel free to email myself or Dr. Maher, and we'll get to those questions right away. If you had anything that you needed to add or questions or anything like that. So can we go to the next slide, please? So our next meeting will be July 15th at 9:30 a.m. At that meeting, again, we'll have a packed meeting, so please come ready to go for the full 2 hours. We really appreciate your time today and your thoughtful conversation. And if I could please get a motion, are there any last comments before we adjourn? Okay, great. If we could please get a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Hello, Jeffrey Harris.
Thank you. And if we could please get a second.
Second.
Thank
Nancy.
you. Thank you, Nancy. All right, well, the meeting is adjourned, and I look forward to seeing you all in July, and I hope you have a great weekend. And if you need anything, please feel free to reach out. Thanks so much.